In the early 1800s, the Catholic Church is restored in France, and there are negotiations that allow the church to be reestablished. And so religious communities do reemerge and start to reestablish themselves. And we know in the city of Saint-Étienne, there was a group of women who began to gather together and have a life of prayer. They were called the Black Daughters because they dressed in all black. And they were recognized as probably as a nascent kind of religious community, a group of women coming together for a religious life that included prayer but also included service. And the local pastor recognized that this was a good thing, but probably that they needed some more guidance. He was nervous that they were being too strict in their ascetic life. So he knew of the reputation of Mother St. John as the superior of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Monastral. But of course, she is living at home, no longer as a sister. So he reaches out to her and asks her, would she come to Saint-Étienne and start to form this group of Black Daughters, but really form them in the tradition of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And at first, she's quite hesitant. She's been home these many years with her family. Her parents are aging. And if you can imagine this time of post-war, it's been quite traumatic. It's been a civil war that has torn this country apart. And so she's in her 40s now and probably thinking her life as a religious woman is probably over. And yet this invitation comes. And eventually she is able to say yes, much to the dismay of her mother, who would prefer that she stay home.
They're afraid for her, and they also need their daughter at home. And what's amazing to me is that Jeanne Fontbonne says yes, as so many brave women have over the course of our history. She says yes, and her sister Marie, who also is a sister of St. Joseph, she sacrifices her vocation to stay home and care for the family so that Jeanne can go forward, because they both can't go.
But she goes to Saint-Étienne, where the Black Daughters warmly welcome her as their new superior, and slowly they start to become formed in the tradition of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And it's in 1808 that the Black Daughters and probably other local women are established as the Sisters of St. Joseph. And this we recognize now as the reestablishment of the sisters after the French Revolution, when in all reality it could have easily died out. They had been dispersed, some had been killed. The courage that it must have taken for them to come back together and to say, yes, we will be Sisters of St. Joseph again. And as they are reestablished and receive the habit and are recognized again, they are told that like a swarm of bees, they shall spread and become numerous as the stars. After the Sisters in Saint-Étienne are founded, she begins to travel the region and to invite women to become Sisters of St. Joseph. So we imagine some of these women were sisters before, but some of them probably were not. And so it's hard to know who was a new sister and who was a returning sister, but we do know that she established over 200 houses of Sisters of St. Joseph in France in the remainder of her life. The sisters grew so much that they needed a mother house and they needed a centralized place to be administered from. And so she moved to Lyon and founded St. Joseph's Convent, and that convent is where the Sisters of St. Joseph of Lyon continue to live today. So she is superior for another 30 plus years in Lyon, continuing to accept women and to establish houses in the tradition of the Sisters of St. Joseph around France.
After the revolution, when she did not die as she thought she would a martyr, as some sisters did, and she was called to come back and to restart this thing that had, because of the revolution, the sisters had all scattered and gone home. So she came back, and to start that again, I think about, how heavy her heart must have been, having lost sisters, sometimes for the choices that she made, but also for the situation that they were in. And then to come back and to find the energy and the heart to do this all over again. And she did. And then, through her leadership, she had to do things that would be so hard. We owe her our history in that she was the one who first sent sisters to the United States from France.
So Mother St. John Fontbonne remains superior into the 1830s, and she receives a letter from the Bishop of St. Louis, Missouri, who has heard of her reputation and the reputation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. So at this time in the United States, there's kind of westward expansion. It's become common for, European missionaries, Catholic missionaries, to come to the United States and to establish schools and hospitals and parishes. So the Bishop of St. Louis, Bishop Rosati, writes Mother St. John a letter and says, "Will you please send us Sisters of St. Joseph?" She's very discerning. She doesn't rush into anything. But after a couple of years, she says yes and asks for volunteers, including 2 of her nieces. 6 sisters are sent to the United States from France, from Lyon, to St. Louis. Most of them never returned to France.
So imagine, these women didn't speak English. They spoke French only, and I don't believe probably a lot of people that they were meeting here in the United States spoke a lot of French. They knew when they went, they would never see Mother St. John again. I think about that, and I think what vision she had, and then what trust she had. She truly trusted in God, and she trusted in that this was what they were called to do in the service of God, in the service of the dear neighbor. And she understood the dear neighbor is not the person only next to you. It is also the person across the ocean in a land you don't know.
It was the first global mission of the Sisters of St. Joseph.
What we know from her letters is she cared deeply. She loved these sisters, all of the women who followed her, and she cared for them. And there was not a detached love that was easy to say goodbye. It broke her heart over and over as she sent forward this swarm of bees. But she did it because that was what they were called to do, and she exemplified what authentic leadership is.
And every time I think about her letting go of those first sisters and saying, "I may never see you again, I'm sending you off to a world unknown with a language you don't have," you know, everything about it was dangerous, unknown. You know, what was that like? And then I say, how could I do less? Look at that courage. How could I be less than that? That grace is alive in us. We have inherited that story. We've inherited that charism. Have no fear.
These 6 women travel to the United States and they settle in a town called Carondelet, Missouri. It is because of Mother St. John Fontbonne and these 6 women who said yes to that mission that the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet were founded in St. Louis. And of course, that is the tradition of the Sisters of St. Joseph that founded Mount St. Mary's here in Los Angeles. As she got to the end of her life, Mother St. John was finally allowed to retire around age 79, and another sister took over as superior, and she spent her last couple of years in retirement in prayer in Lyon. And she is buried in the city cemetery among the people of Lyon. We honor her at the end of her life at the gravesite and offer our gratitude to Mother St. John for her courage, her willingness to stand up to the French revolutionists, to a corrupt church, and to have the courage to reestablish the sisters and then to send them to the United States. That's the reason we're even here. We continue this history, this trajectory, this legacy of the love of the dear neighbor, of unifying love, and of the courage and strength that Mother St. John and the other sisters have shown us.